Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, the Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 Hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa, the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. And if you are not listening to Wes over on the Pin Down with Blake Silverman on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. They do a great job over there. But today we are joined by Shawn Windsor of the Detroit Free Press. So make sure you guys are reading Omari and Shawn over on the Free Press. And a quick little plug of the Motor City Hoops Substack. Pretty proud of what I do over there. Make sure you're subscribed and reading those articles. But Shawn, we're bringing you on for the first time with like joy and excitement and vibes around this Detroit Pistons team as they sit here on January 14th at 21-19, a great road win over the New York Knicks. What do you just think big picture about what we've seen almost halfway through this season?
That as much as I hate to say this, I'm looking forward to when the Lions season is done so we can have some oxygen for basketball, because there are a couple of good college basketball teams in this state right now too, and we're ignoring them. I mean, we're not completely ignoring them, but here I am. I was just working on a column about running quarterbacks and Lions fans' fears of running quarterbacks with Jaden Daniels coming in for the Washington-Detroit game this weekend, and I was thinking, my God, when are we going to get to really deal with the Pistons? So here we are. It's crazy. It's crazy, to be honest. None of you guys saw this, right?
No.
Not this much. No, I mean, this is beyond my expectations thus far, especially when you figure Omari J.I. missed the last 7 games or whatever on top of it.
Yeah, that's the ultimate vote of confidence. I'm ready for the Lions to be done so I can focus on the Pistons more. And I wouldn't say they've been overshadowed by the Lions, because people are definitely tapped in and paying attention. But the fact that the best Pistons run since 2000, whenever, is happening with the greatest Lions season of all time, it does feel like they have to wait their turn a little bit. Like
they do
the same way, yeah.
They do. The Wings of the Sun, the Red Wings have won 7 in a row after a coaching change, right? Michigan State are rolling, and none of that matters. I mean, of course it matters, but you know what I mean, Bryce? Maybe it's a little harder for you to feel that out in the middle of the country, but here, the Lions are just, as Omari said, having a historic year. Still, I think there was some buzz off that win in New York on Monday night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
national audience, everybody's tapped into the Knicks, so you can kind of see the social media waves when Cade does something like that.
I feel it with the Lions still, just because my Motor City Hoops Twitter account is only Detroit people. Like, that's essentially all I follow, and so I see plenty of the timeline still being Lions and all, and rightfully so, right? Like, they've been incredible. They're very much a Super Bowl contender, and on their way to potentially winning it. But I do, as someone who just does the Pistons and doesn't necessarily care about the Lions, because that's not what I grow up watching, I get a little jealous sometimes, and especially now, because in the past it's there's no reason for people to watch, but now there is. And I think that when you see these national people tweeting about it, Shawn, like Bobby Marks, I think either last night or his first tweet today was, the Pistons are the best story in the NBA. That was not what I had on my bingo card for the year. So where do you give the most credit, Shawn? Let's start there. Who gets the most credit 40 games into the season to what we have seen?
Let me just add real quickly. I recorded NBA today because I wanted to see where the Pistons would fall. And naturally, the Clippers and Lakers coming back with the fires out in LA, that led everything. But the Pistons-Knicks was in the middle of the show, maybe the third thing. When's the last time the Pistons were talked about on ESPN and their NBA show? For good reason, right? So I saw Ryan Russillo tweeted out that he taped the game and watched it the next morning, or this morning, I guess, as we're recording, because and tweeted out about Cunningham. So to your point about Marks, it's gained a little, it's gained more than a little bit steam. As far as who deserves the most credit, that's a tough question. I mean, the easy, obvious answer is Cunningham is turning into a superstar. I don't know if he's quite there yet, but he's showing that he's got the ability to do that. I think Trajan Langdon, I'd probably start there after Cunningham, because he's the one that brought in Bickerstaff. Bickerstaff deserves a lot of credit too for completely changing the locker room Langdon with the larger cultural in the culture changes the big building, and then going to get vets. The vets. I mean, Malik Beasley, right? That's what he's doing. The swag he's brought. I mean, obviously, the shooting he's brought. Hardaway looks as engaged as he has in a couple of years.
I was
what I mean?
Real quick, I went on a Knicks pregame before that game on Monday, and obviously they were like, I was talking about Tim Hardaway Jr. being second in the NBA or whatever he is in charges drawn, and they just like looked at me like I was a fool, like they couldn't believe what I was talking about. But real quick, and I know you have a question as well, Omari, like I feel like the vibes are good. I feel like Trajan not only hit it out of the park with what Beasley and Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. do on the court, because they all have gravity. Those guys seem to really care about this, and winning helps, right? Like when you win, it's more fun in general. But I watched Ron Holland hit a corner three the other night, Shawn, and Tim Hardaway Jr. jumped off the bench, ran up to him, like did his little thing, whatever. Like those vibes seem to be good from those three guys.
Oh, they're great. How about the bench rising up and doing the Italian gesture when Fontecchio hits a three? You know what I mean? It's great. And the Lions, sorry, the Pistons are smart. Their social media account tweeting out clips. Yeah. You know, the belt last night and or the players coming into the tunnel in the Garden last night and what they were saying. You know, I'm trying to remember verbatim, but a lot of it's Detroit themed too, and we can talk about that in a second. But that's what I love. And my son is a high school coach and a basketball player like you, Bryce. He doesn't remember any of this. He's too young to remember the last two title teams and those eras, the bad boys and the going to work crowd. And I've been telling him, I'm curious what you guys think. I think if they keep evolving here and keep getting better, and we can talk about that too in a second, I think this has got the chance to be the third iteration of a Detroit kind of team. And that's crazy because Troy Weaver talked about that and was sort of mocked for that. But you know what? In the end, some of his moves might end up being part of the. I mean, Isaiah Stewart's. Think about the picks he's got. But yeah, I think the identity, what we're starting to see right now, is very Detroit, and it's awesome.
Yeah, you can see just the feeling in the arena. Like Jared Goff chant aside, and we don't have to get into that. Just the energy is just different. Like you can feel the excitement. Like you could like hear people talking about him. I feel like the Pistons are one of those teams where like it's just better like when they're better from like a league standpoint because they have that history and they're a team that has not really been in the spotlight except for a handful of years with Blake, essentially since 2008. So you talk about your son not being able to remember that era, and we're like almost 21 years removed from that championship, which you kind of have to remind yourself of, right? Like how long it's actually been. So kind of like with the Lions, it's like there's that pent up, like people wanting to talk about this team, right? Like we're seeing some of the same parallels as maybe the Lions a year or two ago when people were really starting to tune in and see that something was brewing. Yeah,
they're of this area, and the players that have, even though the players may not be, they understand. I mean, Cunningham, famously put the buffs on draft night, but Isaiah Stewart turned into Jalen Brunson at the end of the game, pulling out the Pistons logo on his jersey saying, I'm, what do you say? I'm an MFing Piston. Did you see that, Omari?
Yeah.
I mean, it's stuff like that. That kind of stuff is going to, as long as they keep winning, going to endear this team to this town. And I tell you what, if this group, with a few tweaks here and there, we'll see, evolves into a contender, actual contender, imagine the way they're going to play. They're going to be skilled. They're going to be fast. They're going to be athletic. They're going to be dunking. They're going to combine some old school basketball people are craving for right now with new school skill. That's what Cunningham is, right? And Ivy's even got a little bit of that. I mean, and they're going to talk. Maybe not talk, but they are. They're going to swarm, and they're going to talk, and they're going to run, and they're going to yam on people, and there's going to be skill. That's what the possibilities are with this group in a few years. And that will be it'll be the third version of this Detroit franchise.
It's a really cool mix of like attitude, but coolness. Because you have the Isaiah Stewart enforcer, right? And then like, I don't know about you guys. I think Ron has a little bit of that. Ron is not backing down from anything.
He's a dog.
He is. He's looking for it. And real quick, RB Nesbitt, shout out to the best Pistons. No, shout out to RB for the super chat, the donation there. We did get this hooked up. So this is our very first one live here from RB. And I know he's been a longtime listener and supporter. And we thank you so much. So I was looking for the way to let you guys know that you could do this without being like, hey, toss us a few bucks here and there. So here it is, naturally occurring organically with Shawn. So RB, truly, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate that. Mark also said over here, my first live stream, you guys are doing amazing work. The Pistons on the rise, so proud. But so they have those guys, and then you have like the kind of fun vibe guys and Malik Beasley, right? Like he's just like doing his shimmy and all of that stuff. And then Cade is just cool, right? Like he's just smooth and then here's what's cool though. Like Cade made the move last night on OG where he shimmied him, went in, finished over the top, and then was pissed that he didn't get the call. So he's like screaming at the official. So he's got like that swagger and that intensity as well. It just all, I see Marcus Sasser starting to evolve into this like point of attack. Like I'll just disrupt you. And then we haven't even mentioned Asar Thompson. I'm with you, Shawn. Like there's a certain chemistry and identity that seems to be forming a little bit.
No, for sure. The nastiest move of the night from Cunningham against the Knicks, he missed the shot. It was a minute and a half left. It was he kind of got over to the right elbow and did a spin and a turnaround fadeaway where he just left. I'm trying to remember who was on him. I can't remember the defender, but it was away. It wasn't Karl Anthony Towns. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about? He missed a fadeaway that kind of was in and out, and I don't know if that would have iced it, but it was just nasty. The way he got, not just got to his spot, but then the misdirection, the caginess. I mean, the break he had on the dunk, it's not like LeBron, Bryce, right?
Yeah.
Where he's speeding down and rising up 10, 15 feet in the air. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. And making the crowd just go, oh, my God. It's two in and out dribbles with his right hand through traffic, taking his time, slowing up just a touch, speeding up just a touch to where he's just outwitted everybody and the lane parts at the last second, and then he's dunking. And it's not Kobe dunking, but it's just that sequence to me is just so Cade, right? The way he went end to end there. There's nobody else quite like him right now in the NBA.
Wes says he thinks it was Mikal Bridges. I also think it's Mikal Bridges because Mikal Bridges cannot guard that guy. Like Mikal Bridges has, in my notes from the previous game, I had like a line of 3 where Mikal Bridges on Cade. Man, he's really struggling to guard Cade. And then the final line was Mikal Bridges cannot guard Cade Cunningham. And he couldn't do it last night either. I mean,
OG struggled too.
Yeah, I think OG is probably the best matchup just because of his physicality, but Cade's gotten stronger. Here was Shawn, I want to get your quick thoughts on Cade specifically last night in the Garden, on the road, with the Knicks at full string, playing for something, all of that. He had an awful first half when you figure in the foul trouble and everything else. That was what was impressive to me from Cade last night, was he immediately came out in the second half and he responded. He didn't have, a 15-point game. He started the second half with 4 fouls, and he came out and he played the way he did. That was the most impressive part to me, was what he did up against what he had just gone through in the first half.
If you consider just a half of basketball, it might be the best half of basketball he's played. And he knew he was on the stage, right? And he's been feeling this because he's been playing. He's had a really good season so far, but especially the last month. And arguably the last, 5, 6, 7 games, he's averaging almost 30 a game, and with 6, 7 assists, 8 assists, 6, 7 rebounds, whatever it is, somewhere in that neighborhood. So he's been feeling the last couple of weeks, and then last night he felt the stage and embraced the stage, and was probably a little bummed at the half and said, "I'm going to go out and rip the curtains and stand under that spotlight and show you what I'm about." And that's what he did. And he did it. It's not that he changed his game, but there was this little bit of sneaky edge to him that he let out, I thought, in a way that he doesn't always. You were talking about he wanting the and one. There were a few times where he's turning and staring, right? And I don't know how much he was talking. It was hard to tell, but he was kind of staring, and he was pumping his fists in ways that we see here and there, but just for a whole half, he was like that. And he also knew they were going to have to outscore him. New York is a really good, one of the best offensive teams in the NBA. So he knew, and they were full strength. So he knew that. And so that was what was impressive to me. He's like, I'm not going to let you lose. And here in New York City, this is what I'm about. And this is what we're about.
Can we talk about how fun Cade's game is? Because he has this reputation as, like he's slow and, he does all the right things and this and that. But when he's cooking, he just has so many ways to break down the defense and dissect you. Like I remember he came off the handoff from Stu at the top of the key, and then he just kind of snakes past Bridges and right into the lane. But he had a play. I think it was Josh Hart. Cade came down the court, and Josh Hart had his back turned, and Cade essentially dribbled in a way where Josh Hart could never turn around and actually figure out where he was, and like got all the way to the rim. There's so much shifty, kind of sneaky stuff he does over the course of a game. Like it just seems like whenever he's cooking like that, like it's fun for any player, but he has a really deep bag. At some point, we have to have a conversation about like where does his bag rank in the NBA? Because his handle to me has gotten better every year he's been in the league as well.
Go ahead. Sorry, no, you go ahead, Bryce.
I was just say real quick, like the wiggle and the shake and the ability to create separation in driving lanes has really improved with him over the 4 years he's been in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to me it starts with. I mean, obviously there are a couple things, right? One, he's always he can always see, and he's always had a particular speed in his brain that allows him to move the way he does. But the handle to me is the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was pretty good when he got to the league, but his handle's tighter. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And even just that jump that maybe, I don't know if you want to call it incremental or not, but maybe incremental over the last couple of years since he missed his second year with the leg injury. But to me, it starts with the handle, which then allows him to get a little cleaner separation, which has helped the shooting off the bounce. Obviously, he's working on the shooting separately in a gym, and it's hard to know what this new staff has done. I'm sure they've helped. But without talking to him, we got to get the lines out of the way so we can start doing stuff like that. But you can see that the handle is what's, to me, leading to everything else at this point.
Guys, real quick, any questions you have, get them in. We'll answer them. Shawn's only with us here for another 8 minutes or so, and then Omari and I will talk kind of trade deadline ideas, where we're at, and answer your questions. So get those in if you're here with us live. Also hit the like, subscribe, all of that button. Theodore Metcalf says, I'm from Los Angeles. I have NBA League Pass, and I find myself this season looking at a lot of Detroit Pistons games. I love their swagger. This does not happen over the last 4 years. You know what I realized, guys? The most wins I've watched the Pistons get in a season is 23, and we're already almost there. Like, unbelievable that they're already at 21. I want to get your thoughts on some of the other guys first, Shawn. We can talk Jalen Duren when we have you on later. I actually want to get, for me, I would love to hear your thoughts on Ron Holland and Asar Thompson and what we've seen from those two guys before you have to go. So let's start with Ron Holland. We talked about him just a little bit. What do you think about like his actual basketball game, his defense, his scoring, that type of stuff? What are you seeing with him?
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember if Omari and I talked about this at the Golden State game. I can't quite remember. But here's my take with Ron Holland. To me, and this is assuming Jaden Ivey comes back and is what he was when he left and continues his progression. Which is, it's too bad he got hurt because he was balling himself. And I think finally showed that Cunningham and he can be in the same backboard together from the start of a game, right? Shooting 42% from three. If that's sustainable, then yeah, that's their backcourt. If he keeps evolving. So let's just assume this isn't what we're seeing from Cunningham right now is not his ceiling. Let's assume, I mean, these are always, these come with caveats, but let's assume Ivy, with his work ethic, the way he's in the gym, is going to keep getting better. Duren, whatever. We'll talk about him in a second. Thompson, I think we've already seen what he can be, right, and where he is headed, and that is monster defense. He's so smart offensively. Look, I know you ask about Holland, but to me, he's the key. If he develops a jump shot and everybody else evolves, this is a title contending team. I don't think Thompson has to. I think Holland has to. Because Thompson is so smart offensively in every other way. You saw this against the Knicks. He got a rebound, went up the left side. Somebody kind of tried to hip him, and he bounced. Did you see him kind of tiptoe on the sideline to stay in the court and push the ball? And it led to I can't remember who scored on that. He did that 2 or 3 times. He did that when I saw him in person the other night. Little things like that. Not to mention all the backdoor, all the cuts. And the way the offensive rebounding, everything else. But if Holland can just be a reasonable catch and shoot 3-point guy and attack closeouts, and then bring everything else he does, the defense and the energy, and just that, the folks are in there talking about their swag. He may be the swaggiest of all of them, right? But that's my take with Holland. If a jumper comes and it doesn't look too bad at the free throw, I mean, I know it's a big if, they're going to have themselves a serious team in a couple of years.
Ron has become noticeably more confident in his handle, I feel like, every single week. And against the Knicks, he had 2 drives, I think, out of pick and rolls where he just kind of danced around the defense. And we knew coming in that getting downhill would be one of his strengths. But has that kind of surprised you at all, just seeing those flashes of him being able to squeeze into crevices and find those angles to get to the rim?
Not that as much as what he's doing when he's getting there.
Yeah.
I can remember being on this podcast with Bryce and him saying, I want to see Ivy finish better. Even Cade when he was younger, right? Bryce is and as he should be, as we all should be, he's a big believer in finishing. That may be more surprising to me, the fact that Holland can get there. He's a low-key good finisher, right?
He's been great. He's been great.
He was so early in the year. I was like, I thought the numbers were inflated a little bit because it was so much transition. He had 2 awesome ones in the half court last night, and one was left-handed. And I went back and looked at my pre-draft scouting notes on him, and I mentioned how much he was willing to try his left hand, even though it wasn't always going down. But I always like seeing guys at that younger level. And here's the thing: you talk about him being like a dog and the attitude. This is him. This isn't going to change, even if he becomes a star. This is who he was, guys. I'm not saying to you, like our listeners, when he was in high school at Duncanville, his rep was always, he plays extremely hard. So this is in his DNA. This is who he's going to be. And to your point, then if he becomes a jump shooter of some sort and finisher, and the passing is even average, now you have a guy that plays that hard and scores the basketball. That's a wing you can win some games with.
No, what do you guys think about that? If he develops into that alongside Thompson, who's going to be, Iguodala-esque. I hate to keep bringing that up.
It's a good comp.
With what Cunningham's becoming and what Ivy might become, or what he was starting to show before he got hurt.
Yeah, I'm with it, Omari. I've said, and we'll talk about this in a second, I would take this to the offseason at least, and then you get some more data, especially on those 2. I think there's a chance. I think the part of me that is man, could they really have drafted all of these starters, in back-to-back drafts? Maybe, but I think the path to that happening can be, I want to see it. And you're right. That's what sucks about the Ivy injury is he was shooting the ball so well right before the injury happened.
That might've been his best game shooting the ball too.
Oh, it was up until that point.
Actually, I wrote a story today looking at just 3 numbers behind the Pistons' success during this run. So look for that tomorrow. But it's only 5 games for J.I. out of the 12, but he shot 61% from 3 in those 5 games. So you talk about a guy just getting better and better. I was just like, wow, that blew me away.
Shawn, why would it not work, right? You have Cade as the primary guy, J.I. playing off the ball and can be the secondary guy when Cade's out. And then you have 2 wing defenders in Holland and Nassar. And then you got to figure out what Duren is or isn't. So maybe we end with that.
That's the key. That's the key.
Let's end with that with you. I thought Jalen Duren's defense over the past 2 weeks had shown growth. I'm not saying it was good. Not saying it was even neutral. I thought it was growth. Last night was a wake-up call. It was a reminder that he has a long ways to go, in my opinion. His inability to guard at all and Stu being that effective really showed up in that game. Where are you at with Duren? Offense, defense, otherwise.
It's tricky, right? Because the next game is a perfect example. I was watching it with my hoopster son, and you're right. As soon as Stewart comes in, you can see the defensive footwork, the way he stays down. It's a little bit like, and Holland, I think, has got a chance to be a really good defensive player. But when Holland was on Brunson, he couldn't keep his hands to himself or his feet to himself. The minute Thompson's in, who's only a second-year guy, he didn't bite one single time, right? No, I mean, he just has a knack and a feel for it. To me, that's Stewart and Duren. It's the same. Stewart just has a feel, and not only does he move well laterally out in the perimeter for a big guy, but he knows how to play defense, and it's hard to teach that. It's hard to coach that. But I'm with you. Duren's been a little bit better. Here's the thing, though. He's such a good rebounder.
He is.
And he's such a great lob threat, which spaces the floor in its own way with Cunningham and to a degree with Ivy when he's out there with him, right? It's tricky. I mean, in a perfect world, you want somebody who can protect the rim and space the floor. I mean, I don't know. To me, they got to figure that out. He's got to be better defensively for them to be a true title contender when the rest of these guys, and I hate to even mention that because they're 21-19 and they were 3-36 a year ago. I don't want anybody to misunderstand. I'm not saying they're a title contender right now or even next year, but a couple of years from now, if they get this right, and as long as the moves are, they keep Beasley, whatever, the moves around the margins keep being as good as they were this last year, they're going to have a chance if they get that 5 spot right, whether it's Duren or something else.
All right, Shawn, I know you got to go. You got a game you got to go watch. So we'll get you out of here. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go to break, guys. When we come back, Omari and I will get into a bunch of questions from last week, some questions today. Keep dropping those in the chat. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Yeah, hopefully next time I can stay a little bit longer.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we are back with segment 2, and honestly, there are so many different directions we could go, right?
I mean, I want to get your thoughts here first, Omari.
Okay,
I want to. So I'm doing this mock trade deadline thing, and Brian says, "What's up from Chicago? What's up?" So this has proven to be very interesting for me because one, I'm having way too much fun with it. And if you want to follow along, you can go over on Twitter. I tweeted out all the hashtags and whatever. And I think we're going to end on February 1. I've enlisted Wes to be my assistant GM. So when I make a move that you guys don't like, you can blame Wes. It was his fault. Okay. Yeah, Wes, you didn't realize that was my strategy today when I asked you to sign on as assistant GM.
Don't blame Wes. Leave Wes out of it. Blame Bryce.
Blame Bryce. Yes. Blame Motor City Hoops. Where are you at right now with the trade deadline? What big picture, what would you want to see happen from Trajan? Like, are you like, hey, let's make a big move and let's really push forward? Do you keep things the same? Like, where are you at?
I'm looking at my asset chest and I'm seeing a big gaping hole where, first round pick should be. And you're probably going to convey that this year. And, this is probably your best opportunity to just capitalize on your cap space now and try to close that gap. OKC has 20 draft picks? Like, how many does Houston have? How many does Brooklyn have? Like, you have all these teams. Brooklyn's not good, but you have teams that have what the Pistons have on some level, but also have that treasure chest, right? And when it comes down to making those moves down the road, are you going to get outbid simply because you don't have those assets? You essentially can only do it with players. So I really wouldn't adjust my plan this trade deadline at all. I don't think the Pistons are looking at it and thinking, oh, we have to go and cash in and keep this run, invest in this run to the extent that we can. Like realistically, you're still looking at this as an overall process. Like half your roster is still on rookie deals. Like you take the success this year, but you look at what Memphis did, right? Like they didn't have one overachieving year and then say, all right, we got to immediately go get a guy to to supplement Ja and Jaren. They slow played it. They continued to draft. They continued to develop. And Memphis, they have like the 5th or 6th best net rating, and they still haven't necessarily made that big move, I guess, quote unquote. So if I'm Trajan, I'm still looking at this deadline the same way. Like we need assets. Like we're playing extremely well. That's great. So let's get the assets, and then this time next year we'll be in much better shape. That's how I would go about it.
I think I've landed there as well. I've said for a while, even though I think I tweet stuff out and I think people think that's what I want to do. I tweeted out the Michael Porter Jr. thing. Like that was just, I was interested to see what people thought. And when I reached out, I think the Nuggets actually reached out to me in that scenario. It was just interesting to consider that idea, but I would keep things the same. I would not make a big move till this offseason. You get to this offseason and think about what could change, right, Omari? You would know, is Malik Beasley coming back or not? You right now aren't going to have a first-round draft pick, but that opens up every draft pick in the future. You have that much more data about Ron Holland and about Asar Thompson and about Jalen Duren, which is all very important data to get. And it's going to be really good data now because this team is playing night in and night out competitive basketball games against, like last night was a very good data point because that Knicks team was healthy and is trying to win, and they didn't sit anybody because the Pistons were coming to town. They had to bring their A game. And so you learned a lot about, and there's a lot of those games coming up. They're playing one of the hottest teams in the NBA on Thursday in the Indiana Pacers, who are also fighting for positioning already. Think about down the stretch, Omari. We talk about the play-in games or the potential playoffs. They're going to play months worth of meaningful basketball now, right? Like all of these regular season games are going to matter. So I think my ideal trade deadline is he somehow finds a way to get a distressed, expiring player with future assets, but that player can actually fit into the rotational need somewhere, right? Like you're able to get a guy who can play some backup point guard or can space the floor or something like that, along with getting a future pick of some sort. So I think we're pretty well in lockstep there. Wes, will you throw up the first banner and we'll get into that? Pistons talk real quick. What up, fellas? Locking in from from work. Yes, Pistons talk always locked in from work. I love it. I appreciate that.
Hey, we really appreciate that. Like that's real. And last time you mentioned that you had it on for your coworkers too. So I love that. Let's go.
All right. So this was from the last episode. I told you guys we'd try to get to these. Quick overview of the perception of the 25 first-round prospects, and if there's a point where Detroit is maybe better off conveying the pick. We touched on this a little bit a second ago. Do you have any worries at all if they make the play-in, whatever, and that pick goes somewhere else?
Yeah, you don't mess with success. Like I think that's probably how most front offices would feel. Like Pistons, I mean, like if you have a chance to convey the pick, make the playoffs, you can draft forever and still not hit, right? I think you take success when you have it. And this is supposed to be a great draft, but I mean, again, like at their current pace, you're probably looking at, being like an 11 or 12 in that order, which may get them better odds than being, 1. I don't know, but no, I don't think you. I don't think you do. I think if you're winning, you continue to win, and then you just figure things out from there.
I will tell people this as well. I'm dying on this hill right now. It may change. The draft is a long ways away. This draft is really interesting at the very, very top. Cooper Flagg, really interesting. Dylan Harper, even Ace Bailey, Kasparis Jakichonas, VJ Edgecombe starts making shots, becomes really interesting. The rest of the lottery isn't as exciting as what you may think based on how people talk about the draft. So I'm just letting you know that once you really get into it, and again, it may change, but in my opinion, it's very top heavy and very into the first round heavy. Guess where the Pistons do have a pick this year? Right at the end of the second round. And we saw with Marcus Sasser, it doesn't take a ton to get it back into the first round from the top of the second. I think if they want to add a rookie, they can do one as a role player in that range. So I'm completely cool with whatever happens. As Michael says here, next 8 games are all against playoff teams. We're going to find out a lot about this team before the end of the month. So, Wes, what's the next one? This is from Buy-In. What kind of improvement does Trajan need to make at the deadline? I prefer a small addition, not chasing a star player. Team chemistry has been good. I feel like we've kind of touched on this, Omari. Anything to add to that between the chemistry, not chasing a star player, etc.?
Yeah, I think if there is one thing that maybe you consider now that probably wouldn't have been as big a consideration previously, it's just the fact that you are winning and all of the vets that you signed who were on potentially movable contracts have been a big part of that. Like Tobias has been playing pretty well. Obviously, Beasley, Tamardaway Jr. have been shooting lights out. B's 1-year deal, THJ last year of whatever deal he was in Dallas. Like, do you hold on to those guys now? Like, do those guys factor into the long-term plan? Like, look at the guy like Beasley, who's just really kind of galvanized this entire team just with his energy on and off the court, right? So maybe that's something you can consider. Like, can you take those vets into the offseason, get at least one of them back and still leverage your cap space in a way to where you're not like realistically, like what could you get for like a THJ or B's at the deadline anyway, right? Like, do you move those guys for a second round pick and say assets is assets, or do you keep them and keep your eyes focused on just bringing in that distressed asset for first round picks? Maybe you split the difference a little bit more there, and that's probably the main consideration I would have.
Yeah, I mean, I think with THJ, he only goes out if the 14 million isn't enough. Like if you actually need to send out his 15 million as well as part of it. I'm only moving Beasley as if like I know that he's not going to resign, right? And the only people that actually know those answers are Malik Beasley, his agent, and hopefully the Pistons front office. And so if Malik Beasley gets moved at the deadline by Trajan, my initial reaction will be that Trajan didn't feel like there was a good chance they were going to be able to keep him around. Now, as I've talked more and more to Keith Smith and Kyle Metz and looked at the cap myself, I think there are avenues for them to signing him with salary cap space. The most likely scenario is the non-tax MLE. It kind of depends on how the Pistons want to operate over the offseason. I do think that they can sign him long-term. I think they will be able to. I just would want to know that. And if not, then you may have to move on from him and sell at the highest value, which would really, really stink because obviously he makes a lot of sense with what this team is doing. Other than that, like what I found is every team, whenever I talk in these trades, they want Stu. I don't want to move Stu right now, especially off of last night's game where we saw how impactful he is. Sasser even is interesting enough for me right now where that makes me a little bit nervous. So we'll see. Chuck, you scared me a little bit. Chuck says team chemistry isn't good. And I'm like, oh man, like really, we're going to have, and then he says it's great right now. So yes, it is great. So next one from YouTube user Bryce, have you changed your mind about how good the Pistons are since you recovered on Game Theory? Are they actually good? So for those of you who don't watch, and from Michael, Baisley, Bryce, you ready to call the Pistons legitimately good yet? So for those who don't know, on Game Theory, we did a whole segment on the Pistons. You can go watch it on the Game Theory YouTube. It's about 30 minutes, Pistons only. Find it in the videos. Not yet. It's close, though. Last night got me really close, Omari, to calling this. For the record, I said they were competitive. They were fun, night in, night out, all of that. It's really close. As I said just a little bit ago, they go through this stretch and they're still above 500. They're a few games above 500. And I will eat crow and call them good, and I will be convinced.
Yeah. It's tough, right? Because I feel like the NBA season, for one, this season has moved, I feel like, faster than last season just because so many of the games have been meaningful in last season. Like, the wins you remember pretty well. So many of those losses, like it's just kind of like one long blur of misery. So I've been trying to be pragmatic.
I don't remember anything from last year, Omari. It's crazy.
So I think this is real. We're at the halfway point. Like you're 21-19. That seems pretty good. Like I think me and Bryce are probably in the same boat. February 1st, we will know for sure. And that's my stamp date for this, February 1st.
Listen, I know everybody gets annoyed or tired of my data collection phrase, like which is fine. Like, but this is the ultimate. Like, we're really going to be able to figure out. Wait, what's the Mo Cheeks era?
Oh man. Yeah, this is leading into the Josh Smith era. We'll see if we can get to that later. That's another long story.
Oh, okay. Interesting. All right. So Aruna, we're not keeping our first round pick unless we sell at the deadline, right? I think Aruna is essentially saying if they don't sell, they're going to be, listen, there's only one team. There's only one team that's going to fall out of the playoffs that's in it right now. And if that's if the Sixers find any health, the Nets are trying to lose. The Raptors are so far behind. The Wizards, Raptors, same thing. Omari, there's a pretty good chance that they end up in the play-in. I guess if Ivy wasn't going to come back, they knew they weren't going to re-sign Beasley. But at that point, I feel like they're going to have won enough games where, like, what are you tanking? Like, what are you losing for? Like, what? Like you said, why do you want to keep the 10th or 11th pick? I mean, I guess there's an argument. The Mavs got Derek Lively in that range, but I think they probably do. Like, again, as it stands right now, I would have to bet that they stay in the play-in as opposed to they don't, especially depending on what some other teams do. Do the Bulls sell off on Zach LaVine now that he probably has positive trade value based off the way he's played? You don't know what some of these, what does Miami look like after a potential Jimmy Butler trade? So,
yeah, I think they have a wide open window. And
yeah,
I just don't know. Even though there's a lot of new people in the building, like I still just wonder how strong the appetite for losing is. Right, like this has been the best season since who knows how long so far. If you're a GM and you want to make your stamp first season, you're probably not looking at the last 15 games. Like, let's miss the playoffs. Like, I don't think that's the route that they're going to go if you're still in that conversation.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I think having to sell off on Beasley would be a pretty big hit, right? Like, I think we all understand how important he has been to the team. Mystery Boy 9999 says, how much is the MLE again? It'll be in the 13 range, something like that. And then it'll start to really go up once the new cap stuff hits. So Wes, are we out of the banners from last week? Okay, so we can start going through these. Mystery asks, any new trade rumors, idea what the front office is looking for? Anything there, Omari, from you, just in terms of your vibe on that stuff?
Yeah, just with the Pistons being the one team with cap space, I think they're really going to be a team that, talks will heat up once you start to see more of those moves go down across the league. Like Jimmy obviously is a big domino that needs to fall. Teams are going to need help like leveraging those deals. So, my expectation is that's probably along the lines of how it'll go, right? Like once those talks pick up, the Pistons in some way, shape, or form are going to be helping these teams out. So,
yeah, I mean, the Jimmy Butler, the Pelicans are going to have to do something with Brandon Ingram, I would think, because he's about to enter unrestricted free agency. I mentioned Zach LaVine earlier. There's some names out there, again, I'm not saying these guys end up in Detroit, but like if Bradley Beal was moved, something like that. Like there's names out there that, as Chuck says, the Pistons are handcuffed until other people want to make moves. Real quick thoughts here. Michael says, I wonder how this Detroit season compares to the early Doncic seasons. We are afraid to say Cade is comparable to Doncic, but where are you at with that stuff? Because I've workshopped some other ideas, like could Detroit build out their roster similar to the Knicks, to be quite honestly, Omari? Like the Knicks are Jalen Brunson, that would be Cade playing that role, and then these three wings, that would be Asar, Holland, ideally Ivy, and then a big man. I even brought up the Clippers to Wes. This version of the Clippers, Cade being, the James Harden role in what LA is doing. You find a bucket getter in Norm Powell, a bunch of other wing defenders, and a big man in Zubac. Like Dallas is another example, right? Like essentially you have Luka defending wings, the number 2 in Kyrie, and then the big men that fit him. I think this is the archetype of Cade, especially where we've seen the passing really, really flash this year.
Yeah, like there's already, I think, a pretty established profile of a team built around a guy like Cade. That's your main engine. You want shooting, you want wing defense. Ideally, you want some sort of lob threat and or big that could shoot along with rim protection. That's probably the path the Pistons go down, honestly. But I think the other thing with that is, we talk a lot about team archetypes and this and that, but so much of that I think will be dictated by if and when the Pistons end up getting that second star too, whether that's, somebody you trade for or somebody that they develop internally, right? But yeah, like obviously that's the way you want to go. You want to maintain the shooting they have now. And if you could get another wing defender or two in there with Asar and Ron Holland, like you're probably in great shape.
All right, so Ryan will answer this one, and then we'll go to a break and come back. Thank you for everybody joining us through this live, everybody watching live. Guys, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button. Make sure you're reading the Detroit Free Press with Omari. Make sure you're subscribed to the Motor City Hoops Substack, where I give all my notes, analysis. If there's a move at the deadline, I'll have some like information in the same format for whoever the Pistons may acquire, and then NBA draft stuff when the time comes. And it's all free over there on the Motor City Hoops Substack. I'm really close to 500 subscribers. That was a goal for me starting the year. So I love the subscription and the shares over there. So Ryan says, how would you feel about the Pistons signing Nickeil Alexander-Walker this offseason? I think he'd help a ton. Love the pod. All in. I love Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think he's awesome. I think he really defends. I think he can shoot. I think he can play with the ball in his hands a little bit as like a secondary creator, especially off the bench. I think he'd be an awesome fit. I would love, obviously the price has to be right. I would love for them to find a way to get you add another defender like that to Ron and Asar, and that's really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, I was a big fan of him in that draft. I thought he had a chance to be one of the better role players to emerge out of that draft, and that's what he's become. I agree with everything you said, Bryce. He's exactly what this team needs as a point of attack defender. Can make a shot. Like you can put him in next to Cade, I think, just fine and have zero concerns about it. So yeah, that's absolutely the type of player that they should be going after and prioritizing.
right, let's go. All right, let's go to a short break. And then whenever we come back, Omari, we'll keep rolling through these questions. We got about 15 minutes left in the episode. If you guys want to try to drop one in the chat, we may go through a little bit faster here towards the end, but we'll get right to those with this question as soon as we get back.
All right, we are on segment 3, and we're going to close out by answering more questions. So we have one here from Andrew Boisel. I hope I pronounced that correctly. First time.
That's why I gave you that one.
I think I got it. I feel pretty good about it. First time listening live. Love listening to you guys. Thoughts on Pistons letting the roster ride and not making any moves. So that's essentially what I was getting into earlier, right? Like you essentially just hang on to the vets. Like this is working out well. We have cap flexibility, so like it's not like we can't replace anything that we lose. With that said, like I don't know if you let the roster ride. I think you do something with that cap space. Like I don't think you go past this deadline and just sit tight and not do anything, because you do need to get assets. Like I think that's, to be where you are now and still be owing a first round pick. Like, I think you look at that and that's something you want to fix. So you still probably do some sort of move, but do you shake the roster up, right? Like, do you package a bunch of guys and try to get a star or whatnot? Probably not, unless you get to the deadline if you've won like 15 straight games or something, and it's like, oh, maybe we do actually have a chance to win.
So the one thing I will say is, if nothing like that materializes, I wouldn't hate seeing Trajan make a move to add something to the roster with like second round picks or something like that, right? Like if you could go get a Bruce Brown, a guy I like in Memphis I don't know how much they would is Jake LaRavia. They didn't pick up the end of his rookie. Like just
another guy I like in that draft.
Yeah, like just a guy that can come in. Those guys space the floor a little bit. They defend a little bit. Bruce especially can handle the ball. Actually, LaRavia moves the ball really well. Just if none of the other things work out, if you don't need to facilitate a bigger move and acquire a player with future assets and all of that, I don't hate the idea of Trajan going out and finding a player like that. Not a first round pick, not trading one of like the rotation players necessarily or anything like that, but just a guy that could come in and add to the rotation, especially if Jaden Ivey isn't going to be back. So real quick, Wes text the Luka versus Cade year 4 numbers. The biggest things here is Luka actually averaged way more rebounds, more points, but Cade averaged more assists, more blocks, better field goal percentage, better 3-point percentage, better free throw percentage, which is really, really interesting. So Luka's BPM and VORP were better. And that year, for reference, Luka was first team All-NBA and an All-Star. So just some interesting context there. And that leads us right into this one from Cruiser923. Last night, ex-player and current NBA TV analyst Channing Frye compared Cade to Brandon Roy, which I think is a very on-point reference. Listen, I remember Brandon Roy. I don't remember him this much, so I don't know if you can talk on that just a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't hate that comparison at all. I think Brandon Roy was like more of a better raw athlete than Cade is, even though Cade has had like some pretty decent posters this season. And I think Cade is a much better playmaker. Like I've always kind of seen
that was my biggest difference. Was like I didn't remember Brandon Roy being that level of like playmaker and creator for others. So I was
like I've always kind of seen some Darren Williams in Cade's game just because of how smooth they are. Like I think Darren Williams might have been like a little bit huskier and Cade's taller, but like if Darren Williams were like 6'6", like and could rebound, that's probably my comparison for Cade. Like when I look at Cade's handle and how smooth he is, like that's what it kind of reminds me of.
Yeah. So YouTube user, trading for LaRavia means you probably can't resign him. If you trade for him, everyone else in the league can pay him more. Yeah, I'm with you. Like this would essentially be like, hey, it's just a guy that helps us make sure we win some more games is my biggest thing. And again, that would kind of be a plan C type of situation if none of that other stuff happened. We may want to go rapid fire here a little bit more, Omari. Michael says, seems odd they don't miss Ivy more. Yeah, I thought it would be interesting data to be like, hey, how much do we find ourselves going, man, Jaden Ivey would do this, Jaden Ivey would do that. Team's playing really well. They're shooting the laces off the ball. Like, let's wait as things go through to see if it happens more. But it is interesting right now that we haven't found that yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, they've kept cranking right along. Like you mentioned, like they're shooting like 39% from 3. during this 10-2 stretch. So like they really have been shooting lights out. I'm curious to see if they miss Ivy more during this upcoming stretch, this upcoming 8-game stretch, where they probably just need somebody else who can create a bucket, which, like, again, they've been propped up by THJ and Beasley. Tech's been shooting the ball better. Tobias has been shooting the ball better. Like, they have guys who have stepped up. So over these next 8 games, I think that'll probably test them more as far as needing another guy who can just supplant Cade and like keep some stuff generating. Like Sass, I thought did a great job against the Knicks, but we've seen our second unit have good stretches, and it's just like stretches where they clearly miss having a guy like Cade on the floor. So again, like probably need more data on that, but the second unit has, I think, stepped up to an extent.
Yeah, and do we get into games where it's like, man, they could really use a second scorer right now, but it seems like so far Tim Hardaway Jr.'s done it here, Beasley's done it here, Harris has had a couple games, which is why you bring in those vets, but that is mask a little bit of the need as those guys take a rotating turn of doing it. Detroit for Life 1000, Weaver should get some credit for assembling the young core. His downfall was not placing the proper players around them. That's part of an interesting, bigger debate, right? Like he did technically draft a lot of these guys. I definitely agree with the second part where not placing the right players around him. And that was a fatal flaw, obviously. But yeah, he did draft a lot of these guys. And so it would be interesting. It'd be interesting to see how many of those guys stay on the roster and move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you had how many draft picks, like a 4-year span, and he did hit on like a good share of them, right? Beef Stew's become an anchor for this team. Cade's Cade, and that one was probably the obvious one, but Ivy and Duran, I think for those spots in those drafts, like you could still defend those picks. So I mean, they have a lot of young guys that clearly have some talent. It's clearly clicking, and Trajan inherited a team obviously that had a lot of it in place. So credit does go to Troy, obviously, for putting that together.
Big Dog Piston says we need a nickname. Yes, I think that would be cool. I am not creative, so don't ask me for one. Also says go get us Lonzo Ball. So that would be another name that I would be interested in, depending on what Chicago would want, because you acquire Lonzo. He does some of the things we're talking about, Omari, but also an expiring contract. So it continues to give that cap flexibility to re-sign Beasley if you want to try to make a run at Miles Turner, if he even becomes available. So I think some of those names interest me in some capacity.
Yeah, no doubt. We have about 8 minutes, so we can keep going through
Kian realized something. I'm not sure Bryce's 3 kids have lived in a world where the Pistons have won a playoff game. Kian, that is true. 2008 was the last Pistons playoff win. None of my kids were alive then. 2008, funny enough, my wife and I were not even speaking to each other in 2008. We were in a little bit of a 3-year, we don't talk to each other for a little while before getting back together. So good stuff there. Good thing she doesn't listen to the podcast. Michigan Sports Takes.
I'm not going to touch that one.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was good. It's a classic movie love story where you date and then you don't talk and then you come back and it's all good. Michigan Sports Takes. Amari's like, wait, this is how this works? Yes. If the Pistons make a trade in half, no, I don't want to. This is the one you don't want to touch the last one. I don't want to touch this one. You answer. Have to include either Holland or Asar. Who would you be more comfortable seeing go?
That's tough.
It is tough.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to answer that one. I don't know. First of all, what scenario would that even be? Let's start there. What scenario would you have to trade one of those guys? Look, I think if you're just looking at overall long-term upside of all of these guys, like Holland and Duran are pretty close to the top of that list, right? So it just comes down to what you value more. If you want that true defensive stopper type, potential all-NBA player, you probably go with Sar. If you want somebody who can defend but also has more scoring upside, you probably go Ron. But we've seen 40 games around. I don't know. I feel like I need to see a season around before I can start making those types of statements.
Yeah. Listen, if you made me make a decision right now today, I had to in the next 30 seconds, I would probably take a SAR. I think there's just more data there. But reserve the right to definitely change my mind there. And I don't want to trade either. Giannis trade. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Michael says, let's say Detroit, that was from our guy, YouTube user. He always likes to play along. Let's say Detroit gets to the real playoffs. What Detroit roster weakness gets exposed in a playoff strategy? Or do you think Detroit can function in a playoffs. I think a team screens them to death. I think defensively they are very poor with screen navigation on and off the ball. And it's not just Tim Hardaway Jr. and it's not just Jalen Duren's fault that he's not always in the right spot. Across the board, I think the team struggles with screen navigation. And I think offensively, it would be the turnovers. I think that could doom them in a playoff series. Even though they are better, they're actually down to 21st in turnover percentage, which isn't last at least. But I think in a playoff series, that could really start to hurt them.
Yeah, I would say going cold from 3.
Sure. Yeah.
Because they don't get to the line a lot and they also put teams on the line a lot.
Great point.
And I think along with that, they also just don't generate a lot of rim pressure and they don't finish at the rim particularly well either. So like a lot of this again, like I think their red hot 3-point shooting has propped up their offense to an extent. And yeah, in the playoffs, it's just, if you go cold from 3, like does the game just become Cade like 1-on-5 like we've seen in the past, right? I'm not sure. So it's that, and then also just how it's ref. Like if you keep putting teams on the line, then you're gonna have a hard time winning as well.
Okay, so Mr. My City says, no love from my point of view, but guys, seriously, isn't broken right now. It was broken last year. They're just beginning as Mr. My City. We agree with you. We spent the whole pod saying, don't make these moves. We're just answering questions. So yes, we love your point of view. We are with you. And thank you for listening. Wes says Asar, but I'd be so ridiculously upset. Yeah, I did not like that question at all. That was very rude of whoever asked us that, but thank you for the support.
Yeah, just put us right on the spot, man.
Right on the spot. Love it. That's why they pay us the big bucks. RB Nesbitt, you paid us the big bucks. So thank you again for doing that. Sorry, Wes. Pistons make me drink on Sunday. Not anymore. Maybe enjoy. On Sunday, Pistons talk. Outlined a player that makes sense for them, DeAndre Hunter. Would a player like that make sense for the Pistons? So
I've always thought DeAndre Hunter would be a good fit for this team. Going back like 2 years, 2-3 years, honestly, I've always thought he was like sort of the 6'8" dude that could knock down shots that just makes sense for this team.
Yeah, no, so the funny thing is the Hawks actually reached out to me on this like mock one I'm doing. Yeah. And the asking price was just too much though. I right now this is they're going to sell high on him and you're buying very high because he like hasn't missed a shot all year. So
yeah, I wouldn't give anything up necessarily to get him. Like I don't think he necessarily addresses a big enough need where you're giving up assets to get him, but like I would sign him like for sure. Like I think he makes sense.
He's been really good. And Mystery Boy, we are going to answer your question. I promise. Devon says, I've been saying that all year, get an expiring vet point guard. I put this one here just we heard you. I heard you. I realize now it's like, hey, duh, guys, if somebody got hurt, you needed this. My pitch all along was, though, who was that guy that was going to be okay just being the break glass in case of emergency option as the third point guard? So, yes, it's a weakness now. I understand that. I just felt like who was signing up for that all season whenever these guys were healthy. So,
yeah, and they've stayed afloat so far. Like I'm still not inherently against it. Like I still think that that's probably the most obvious roster need, but they've also performed a lot better than I thought with Cade essentially being the lone pure point guard on his team. And it helps when he's probably played his best stretch of basketball so far. So again, over the next 8 games, I think that point guard depth will be tested a lot.
All right. YouTube user says, what do you think of CJ and any minimum from New Orleans for Hardaway Jr., Sasser, Wendell Moore? It gives us a pretty good expiring for next season. Like I think CJ makes sense here.
Yeah.
I mean, the one I don't love including here is Sasser. I realize like Sasser being the piece you don't want to include in a move doesn't probably register with a lot of people. I will just say, I think CJ makes sense. Like I like the idea of CJ. I'd have to look and see like, what would that mean? I wonder if that would put you in a situation to make it tougher to re-sign Malik Beasley. That would be the only thing I'd want to know there. I think CJ would make a lot of sense on this roster in general, though. And
yeah, I think so for sure. My thing with CJ is like, but how much does it move the needle in the grand scheme?
No, yeah, for sure.
That's my thing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you again. In general, I would stay put. El Blausis says we're experiencing the benefit of JB sticking with his go-to rotations and keeping roles set. I'm with you. I know a lot of people have screamed for Tim Hardaway Jr. out of the starting lineup. I even got to the point at one point with Duren saying for a couple games to take him out and then put him back in. But the consistency of the roles does seem to have played off well with this team thus far.
Yeah, no, I mean, it truly has. Like, especially like it just seems like guys more and more know exactly what they need to do when they go out there. And I feel like that type of definement of role hasn't always been as clear for this team. But it's tougher to kind of have that, I think, when you're a bad team anyway. So they've persisted for sure.
All right, mystery boy, our guy. If we make the playoffs, who is our ideal matchup to win a first round series? So here are the options, Omari, because we can't just say like, oh, the Chicago Bulls, right? So our options are the Cleveland Cavaliers, Boston Celtics, New York Knicks, Orlando Magic, and then I will throw in the Pacers and the Bucks. So any one of the top 6, just because like there's enough that maybe those guys, those teams could get high enough. So
yeah, I mean, none of those teams are really great matchups, to be honest. Like, I would probably go New York only because the Pistons like have won twice at Madison Square Garden. So clearly, from on some level, they're able to match up with them. I also think they could probably match up decently against Milwaukee. Like, a lot of that really is just like what version of Brick Lopez shows up, I think. But like, you're not going to slow down Giannis that much. But I've always thought Stu has done as good a job on Giannis as pretty much anybody else. You still have Dame. Yeah, I mean, none of those matchups are good, but I think just positionally, like Milwaukee and New York probably give you your best shot. And probably Indy too. Like, I think that's more of a shootout, but I think they can hang with Indy as well.
okay, so we both would agree Cleveland, no, right? Like
No,
they're so good right now.
they always get smacked by Cleveland anyway. Like, I don't know what it is, but like I just do not recall them playing many good games against Cleveland in the last few years. So
Boston, no. Like I realize
yeah,
Boston's in a funk right now, but no.
no,
The Knicks are interesting. The stretch big situation still makes me nervous, but they have proven that they cannot guard Cade Cunningham. So this could
yeah.
be like a Cade Cunningham just dominates the series. Orlando, I don't love because they just defend their butts off, man. Like
And
they're
they just
so
muck
good.
things up so much, and it seems like they always get the Pistons off their rhythm a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
like
And
they just play like they play like the old Pistons brand of basketball that nobody wants to deal with in like modern basketball.
yeah, they're and if you get Paolo and Franz back, I don't know that the matchups there are great.
Yeah,
I actually wasn't going to pick the Bucks because Giannis is a tough matchup outside of Stu, and they have the stretch big. Indiana has the stretch big as well. We'll see this on Thursday, but if I had to make a decision right now, it would probably be the Pacers because I think that is the series out of any where I would be the most confident that Cade Cunningham would be the best player in the series, right? Like would you agree with that? Like it's
yeah,
not
like the two best
Giannis,
players in that are
him and Halliburton,
and
right?
Halliburton, yeah,
And I think he's had a better year than Halliburton. Orlando, you have Paolo and Franz, who are both having really good seasons when not hurt. Bucks have Giannis, who's a first team All NBA guy. The Knicks, you have Brunson and Towns. Celtics has Tatum and Brown. Cleveland, like they do a little bit, all of those guys are playing well, but I would feel confident that Cade was going to be the best player in the series against the Pacers. And so I think that's the matchup I would take.
yeah. And nobody on the Pacers, I think, is really going to bother Cade that much.
Sure.
Nembhard does a decent job.
He's solid. He's a good defender, but a
Yeah,
little bit not like doesn't have a ton of length. So
no, definitely gives up a lot of size. So yeah, I would probably go Indy, I think, after further thought, and then New York would be second.
yeah. So Adam Gray says, are we sold on Sasser being Cade's backup for the rest of the year? I'd hate to see Cade have to play extended minutes and risk potential soft tissue injuries. I'm in on seeing Sasser. Sasser has done some of the stuff defensively I wanted to see. Made huge buckets last night. Like that's an underrated part of last night's game is some of the guys that got buckets in the non-Cade minutes were huge. They didn't let I think when Cade would go out, instead of it being a 6-point Knicks advantage, it was only a 2-point Knicks advantage. And so that is huge for this Pistons team. And so I'm interested in Sasser continuing to get this. I have more of an appetite than most to see Asar try to do some of this just to see what it looks like. So I still think they should bring somebody in, but I don't want it to completely eliminate all of those minutes.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they've played pretty well with the current rotation. You could always give Dennis Jenkins a shot, if you want a little bit more depth there, but so far they've persisted. So, I think the thing with Sass is if you're going to be a scoring guard, you need to come in and be a scoring guard, right? And as long as he's knocking down those big threes and taking care of the ball, I think you could live with that.
All right. So let's cut it off there. We've had a lot to talk about. You can tell the energy is good and the vibes are good because we've started to go long over the last couple episodes. It's easy to string these out. I feel like we didn't even talk about everything we could have. I think we could have done a whole episode just on that Knicks game. So again, thank you again to RB Nesbitt for our first super chat. We appreciate you so much. Guys, that is available now. If you're interested, you put one of those in there and we will make sure to get to it ASAP. We kind of answer all of your questions anyway. So it'd really just be hey, we appreciate your guys' hard work. So thank you guys for that. If you watched, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, the share button. Make sure you're reading Omari on the Free Press. Make sure you are subscribed and reading the Motor City Hoops Substack. I have lots of notes and analysis after every game and included videos now. So thank you again for everybody who joined in today. We will be back sometime a week from now. And Omari, take it away, my guy.
Yeah. Big thanks to everybody for joining us. Definitely a new energy. And now that the Pistons are playing much better basketball. So we'll see how long they continue. So big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chand, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes Davenport as always. And we'll talk to you all next week.